So I'm going to call our meeting to order. I have 5:32. In attendance, we do have all trustees. We're just waiting on Trustee Burgess to join us on the phone. We do have Trustee Sartori and Trustee Olmsted on the phone. The rest of us we have here in person. So we're moving on to approval of the agenda. I have a slight amendment to make. I'd like to add the land acknowledgement when we reconvene into public session. So if I can get a seconder for that amendment, thank you, Trustee Cook. Any other amendments to the agenda we have in front of us this evening? Seeing and hearing none, all in support of the agenda as amended? Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm looking for a mover and a seconder to convene us into private session. Trustee Hatfield, seconded by Trustee Leclerc. All in favor? And that passes. We are into private session. Give it just a few minutes, everyone. Trustee Sartori, Trustee Burgess, and Trustee Olmsted. We do have all trustees in the room. We're just waiting on Trustee Halberstadt to come back. And I do appreciate everyone's patience as we were a little late leaving our private session today. So I will read our land acknowledgement, and then we will continue through the remainder of the agenda as it's presented. So we acknowledge that we are on land and surrounded by water, originally inhabited by indigenous peoples who have traveled this area since time immemorial. This territory is within the lands honored by the Wampum Treaties, agreements between the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Lenni Lenape, and allied nations to peacefully share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. Specifically, we would like to acknowledge the presence of the Three Fires Confederacy, Ojibwe, Odawa, Potawatomi, and Huron-Wendat peoples. We are dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture while remaining committed to moving forward respectfully with all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. I will note anecdotally that I have heard that our land acknowledgement read publicly by other organizations, that they've chosen to read our land acknowledgement publicly. So I'm grateful. I'm grateful that it's providing that service in the community as well. We are moving on to the special order of the day. Director Kelly.
Trying to think. Perhaps we can all stand. Yes, I'm just trying to think how to do this because I'm not going to go to the mic. Please join me in the tribute of the day. Jaden Powell was a brave young man. As he battled leukemia and a variety of other health issues, he displayed an enduring sense of humor and warmed hearts with his big smile and immense love of singing. Jaden joined the STEPS program at Essex District High School in September 2017 and immediately became a favorite among students and staff. He'll always be remembered for his fancy dress shoes, Under Armour workout shirts, amazing daily lunches, and the love he had for everyone. And no one can forget the joy he felt from scaring his friends with a loud boo as he turned a corner or entered a room, and the laughter that elicited. It was no surprise that he was so appreciated and admired at Essex District High School. Jaden passed away peacefully at home, surrounded by his loving family in July. He was 18 years old. Please join me in a moment of silence in honor of Jaden. Please be seated.
Thank you very much. Moving down through our agenda, we are at E. Any declarations of conflict of interest for in here, trustees? Seeing and hearing none. Actions of the board meeting private session. Trustee Cook.
Yes. We have looking for a mover for F1, and that's under property. Trustee Higgison and Trustee Hatfield, all in favor? Motion, or that passed. Now we're looking for a mover for F2 and F3. We're going to keep those together. Trustee Hatfield, Trustee Leclerc. All in favor? And that,
Burgess?
thank you, Trustee Burgess. And that passes. And then, yeah, F4. We have that Trustee Sipcar and Trustee Leclerc. All in favor? And that passes. Thank you.
Burgess?
Thank you very much. So I'm at approval of the minutes. Trustees, we have 4 past minutes in here. I'm looking to move these all together. I'm seeing nods from over here on my right. Trustee Hatfield and Trustee Leclerc have put those motions on the floor. Any discussion from trustees?
Burgess?
Go ahead, Trustee Burgess.
Page 32 in our minutes of the public board meeting, special meeting of the board, Wednesday, September 1st. It was a confusing time, I'll give you that. But at 32, in the middle bolded, there are 2 motions on the floor at the same time with an amendment. And it said the vote was called and was defeated. And then after your comments are noted, the vote was called and was carried with an abstention with Trustee Hatfield. I think it's confusing the way it's captured. It was a confusing time. But I believe that there was a motion that was, and then an amendment that was, and then an original motion you spoke to at the end, that was carried. And I don't get that from minutes as they're captured on 32 and top of page 33. And I wonder if we could just fix that. I would suggest sending that to what happened.
I'm going to pass this through to Madame Leboeuf for comment.
So it was a very confusing meeting. Looking back at the tape, there were a number of motions that were put on the floor and then later withdrawn. So they don't appear in the minutes at all. So what was finally voted on was the original main motion, and I can certainly add that the vote was called on the main motion, if that suits your concerns.
Right, just to reflect that there was an amendment, but the main motion was carried.
There was no amendment to the main motion. Those were all withdrawn off the floor.
Okay, so in the middle of the thing, moved by Trustee Hatfield, seconded by Trustee Cook to amend motion, that was defeated.
Correct.
But the main motion that goes before that, and out football helmets, etc., that was carried.
Correct.
And I believe that the way it's set out in it don't really capture that.
Okay, I can add the words main motion.
Yeah, and the vote was called on the amendment. The vote was called on the main motion, and it was carried.
Correct.
Okay, so I've got that amendment on
very
the
much.
floor. Does that have a seconder? Madame Leboeuf, would you mind reading what the amended minutes would read?
So on the top of page 33, where it says the vote was called and it carried and Trustee Hatfield abstained. So the amendment will now read the vote was called on the main motion and it carried.
So that's been seconded. All in support of that amendment? That's supported, thank you. Any other discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all in support of the approval of the minutes, all 4 together. And that passes. Wonderful. Student trustees, I know that your votes aren't recorded, but you can feel free to lift your hands if you'd like to note that as well. Okay, so we're moving on to business arising from the minutes. Anyone have business arising from those minutes? Trustee Hatfield.
Thank you. So I wanted to know what's happening with the football helmets and if we found a staff volunteer to be the convener of a football program and a volunteer to look after the helmets and whether or not they can get them done in a reasonable time and what the cost might be.
Superintendent Amender?
Thank you for the question, through you, Madam Chair. So far, on the 13th, the gentleman from, I believe it's Riddell, came down to get the helmets. So they are all at the shop right now being recertified. We had 8 schools that submitted their helmets to be recertified. And we have Joe Amacarelli, who has decided to, he is the WEXA person that oversees it, and he's decided to still continue to do it for WEXA. And we have a gentleman, Dan Gray, who's a vice principal over at Westview. He has volunteered to be a convener of those teams. We had a week ago, it was a training session for the safe tackle that we put out there for the coaches. That was I think there was 3 that we know for sure attended, possibly a 4th one that attended. And so that's where we are.
So is the plan then to run a house league program before all our schools get closed down very soon with all these high-risk exposures you're emailing to us every 2 minutes?
Sorry about that. At this point in time, we have to wait till October 1st. We don't know what the health unit is going to say. They may strongly recommend that we don't do the sports or do have celebrations like it is right now. So once we find out that, if they give the go-ahead and say that it is okay, then all of those individuals will start, I guess, putting together a little season. It'll be a modified season for whatever teams end up playing.
I have Trustee Cook and then Trustee Halberstadt. Go ahead, Trustee Cook.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Just curious, how many helmets were sent out and at what cost?
Thank you for the question, to you, Madam Chair. There were, I can go over each individual school if you'd like.
That's the total.
Okay, because I didn't add them up, but I have each individual school. They're between $70 and $80 a piece. Okay. We have Sandwich Secondary. They had, sorry, my glasses are fogging up here. They had 1 helmet out for reconditioning. 66 helmets are good to go. 16 helmets were deemed as discards on the 10-year and out policy. Tecumseh Vista, 25 helmets deemed discards on the 10-year and out policy, and a helmet with the warranty expired. They had 13 helmets deemed as good to go, and there was not any that they had that required any reconditioning. Bell River, 24 helmets for reconditioning, 40 helmets good, 6 discarded. Riverside, 26 helmets reconditioned, 12 helmets good, no discards. Massey, 43 helmets out for reconditioning, 28 deemed good to go, 1 helmet deemed discard. Kennedy, 4 helmets out for reconditioning, 28 deemed good, 40 deemed discard. Herman, 5 helmets out for reconditioning, 72 deemed good, 0 with discards. And Essex, 24 helmets out for reconditioning, 28 deemed good, and 10 deemed as discards. So those are the numbers.
Yeah, that's great though, because it's a lot less than what initially was thought, right? Like 1,000 or more. So, that's excellent.
Yeah, I don't know if the gentleman, I'm not sure if the gentleman maybe added up the numbers properly.
Trustee Halberstadt.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, Todd, thanks for putting this together. I'm just wondering, you mentioned about the certification of the coaches. You said there was 3 or 4. So would they all have to be certified before the league would start up again? And what's happening to that effect?
Well, the one thing that we obviously can't do, because it is voluntary, is force them to take the course. So if there could be some that have their qualifications already, and maybe that's why they didn't go. Some may not want to coach right now, and there may be a loss of interest in it. So there's varying reasons. So they know it's out there. Every person that coached last year or had any interest in coaching was made aware of this course. They were all told by the principals, and the department heads got around to everybody.
Okay, so at what point will we know that there will be enough coaches to put on a season, or half a season, or whatever it might be?
Well, I guess what we're going to have to do is survey the schools again to see who has their certification already, and we'll get the 4. There could be more than the 4, it's just that they haven't submitted the receipts yet to me. But I do believe it was only 4 based on word of mouth.
Thank you.
Okay, so Gail asked about the cost of the helmets. Did you have a round figure or partial figure?
Yep, $70 to $80 per helmet.
Times?
The numbers that I just shared with Trustee Cook.
No.
Approximately $8,000.
8,000, and that would be taken care of by the schools or by WEXA, or?
Yeah, that's taken care of by the schools. If they do need some help, I have a little bit of a budget that I can help them with. And the training is taken care of from myself.
Thank you. Any other questions, business arising from the minutes?
Burgess?
Go ahead, Trustee Burgess.
On that very point, there were quite a few. I was kind of marking down the ones for reconstruction, et cetera. But for the ones that are discard, does that mean they need replacement, or would they be surplus, or does funding again come from the school and or central budget that we passed in June for making up for those ones that need discarding and possibly replacing?
Thank you for the question, through you, Madam Chair. Those obviously are discarded. The schools would have to replace them. However, they may have been discarded for a couple years now, just because we've had, with the COVID, they haven't really been checked. So, and depending, there has been lower numbers of players, with the exception of probably Herman, that are trying out for the teams.
Participants are waiting in the lobby. To admit all participants in the lobby, press *21.
So to your question, Trustee Burgess, they would have to replace them if they had that many students that were going to be playing. I don't believe that they will, and I think they've already been discarded previous. And football helmets have always come from school budgets. But like I said, this year, if they need some help, I can certainly do that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other business arising from the minutes? Seeing and hearing none, we'll move on to presentations. Right now we have our student trustee presentation. Who's going first today? I almost gave you an upgrade there. Student trustee Hawkins.
Thank you. Since the beginning of our term on August 1st, Malik and I have been working to familiarize ourselves with the role as well as transitioning into the start of our first semester. We started by brainstorming goals for our term and developing a plan of initiatives we would like to accomplish. As students, we recognize how challenging the transition from grade 8 to grade 9 may be. To help with this transition, we have created a digital booklet entitled The Grade 9 Guide to High School. This document focuses on graduation requirements, timetabling and scheduling, pathway information, learning resources and student success programs, course selection, My Blueprint, and EDSB. The digital booklet will be shared widely on various social media and EDSB platforms. At the end of the booklet, there is an Advice to Grade 9 section that includes words from former and current GEC DSB students. We hope this booklet will help ease the transition to high school and answer questions that students may have about what awaits. On August 25th, we launched the 2021 Student Input Survey, which asks GEC DSB students to rank issues based on how important they are to them and to their schools. Additionally, students are urged to provide feedback on other issues of importance. Thus far, our students have expressed that mental health, anti-racism, and future academic and career planning are of much importance. We are grateful to all students who have taken the time to fill out the survey and share their opinion. Going forward, we are looking forward to welcoming our Student Senate representatives ahead of our first meeting on October 12th. We will start planning the 2021 Virtual Student Leadership Conference and continue our student advocacy work. Malik and I would like to thank Michelle Marcus and Superintendent Korbach for their guidance on these initiatives. Thank you as well to Director Kelly, Senior Administration, and to all the trustees for your work in ensuring the return to school was safe for all GEC DSB students and staff. We look forward to working with you this year to support our school community. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that presentation and welcome. It was wonderful. Do we have any questions for our student trustees? Any questions? I do have one. What are some of the goals? You mentioned some of the goals that came out of, or some of the themes that came out of the student survey that you did. What are some of the goals that you kind of have in mind for using some of that data?
So one of the widely number one issues is mental health, and to support students with mental health, we plan to bring notice and awareness towards the mental health supports that our board already offers to students, because a lot of the time students are unaware of the supports that they have in their school and in their school community. So that is definitely our number one goal for to help support students in mental health.
Very important indeed. Thank you very much. Thanks for your work and your ongoing work. Moving on to trustee service pins. We're at I2, and I have the great honor of presenting this particular presentation. I wish it could be a little different, although COVID time still allows us the opportunity to have some celebrations here. So the Greater Essex County District School Board Service Recognition Award is a reflection of the pride and spirit of the GEC DSB family. We are very pleased to recognize the long-standing service of our employees and trustees and celebrate their commitment to education with a special presentation. Those who have achieved long-standing service with the GEC DSB and its predecessor boards are presented with a pin that depicts our logo. It's over there. Two figures working together, reaching for a star. Recipients are presented with a bronze pin after 10 years of service, after 20 years, a silver pin, after 30 years, a gold pin, and after 40 years, a gold pin embellished with a diamond. So that's goals for all of us. And this evening, I am pleased that Trustee Burgess will receive her 20-year pin. Trustee Burgess began her term of trustee in December of 2000. As a trustee with the GEC DSB, she has served as chair and vice chair of the board and on many of its standing, permanent, and ad hoc committees. She has complemented her local contributions with her activity in the Trustees Provincial Organization, OPSPA. I would just like to add personally that Trustee Burgess, as a newbie trustee myself, has been a wealth of information, and I am deeply appreciative of her 20 years of service. That has been such a professional development for me. So please join me in congratulating Trustee Julia Burgess. I hope that's you clapping for yourself, Trustee Burgess. I have a letter here for you and your pin. I don't quite have 20 years of service in yet myself, so I will not keep that, but we'll make sure that we get that to you, and congratulations to you. Trustee Burgess. I will move on through to delegations. We don't have any delegations this evening. We do, however, have 3 people on our speakers list this evening. They will be joining us by phone as we are at capacity.
I was muted. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Trustee Burgess. So we do have 3 people on the speakers list. They will be joining us by phone as we are at capacity in our room this evening. And I believe we have them on the phone, although it does take just a few minutes to connect them over. So we have 3 people on the speakers list this evening. We have Rob Moore speaking on extracurriculars. Shannon, pardon me if I butcher this name, Pelishier, requests a review of policy and regulation, administration of medication, and Margaret Hawkins speaking on naming of the school in Amherstburg. So I believe Rob Moore will be first.
Hello?
Unknown participant is now joining.
Hello?
Hello, Rob. We can hear you, so you'll have 5 minutes, and I'll begin my my timer when you begin.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Rob Moore. I'm a parent of a grade student as well as a volunteer.
Sorry, Rob. We have a bad connection here. Is there? We can't really hear you.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Barely.
Hello? Okay. I apologize. Technology. Can you hear me now?
That's slightly better. If you can just speak up.
Yep. I can speak now. Okay. Hello, my name is Rob Moore. I'm a parent of a grade 12 student as well as a 20-year volunteer coach with the Greater Essex County District School Board. I'm here tonight representing thousands of students, parents, and coaches across Windsor-Essex County. On September 3rd, 2021, the Ministry of Education released a statement developed in consultation with the medical experts, including the province's Chief Medical Officer of Health. In a review of the provincial science table report, the measures we are taking are designed to keep the students as safe as possible when at school. Be able to participate in extracurricular activities, clubs, music, and the arts, as well as a range of sports within school and through inter-school sports activities. With some modifications, unfortunately, this has not happened for our students in Windsor-Essex County. I understand WEXU recommended a postponement of extracurricular activities with the possibility of return in October. Many are disappointed this recommendation has been taken, as students in the majority of areas around the province are in full swing. This is a frustrating part that does not make sense. All community sports are running: football, volleyball, basketball, baseball, etc. If the health unit is not shutting them down, why are they not running in schools? 4 students can't participate in a school golf or tennis team, but are leaving right after school to go play. This past weekend, local travel volleyball clubs hosted tryouts, some with 40 athletes. The health union is allowing this. Why can't schools have volleyball with 14? Safety protocols can be taken. School physical education classes are running, up to 27 kids in a class, following safety protocols. Why can't our school sports team do the same? Our teachers and coaches can be trusted to follow board, health unit, and OFIA recommendations. The concept of students not mixing outside of their classrooms and cohorts during school time is not a reason for extracurricular activities not to run. They ride on buses with students from various classes. During lunch hours, limited students are permitted in cafeterias, with hundreds of other mingling in groups outside. They walk through hallways with all students. Our high school students can drive cars with friends to and from school and work in public and socialize. Mental health has been at the forefront of this pandemic for our young people, yet we continue to deny them these activities that will help them through these trying times. The purpose of school activities is for all students. By not having extracurriculars, we are causing division, those who can't and those who can. Many families cannot afford and are unable to put their children in outside school activities, sports. School sports they have, and it's not fair. The COVID number in Windsor County is not staggering. Yesterday, the number was 27, low. Our hospitals are not overcapacitated. Many of our high school students and staff are vaccinated. Other areas of the province have high case numbers per capita, yet the boards are allowing extracurricular activities. If the school activities return in October, our students are already a month behind. Wexford Cross Country, for example, is scheduled for October 20th. That gives students 13 school practice days to prepare for a 5K race at With Hills. Season will be halfway through. There should be no delay in allowing teams to begin practice now in preparation for a return. They need it physically and mentally. If this school year does not get back to providing activities, our current grade 12s will graduate with 1.5 years of regular complete high school education. Clubs should be able to meet in classrooms, masked, following protocols. Many school programs that provide student-to-student tutoring and peer support should not be delayed. This health, wellness, and success of our kids depend on it. And today alone, that Dr. Kim Moore recommended and came on the news and said today that our schools are back to normal, they're running great, and our cases are limited and outbreaks are contained. I have 3 questions that I'd like to see if you guys can answer them today. 1, the health unit is recommended, not mandated, no extracurricular activities. That is clear as community activities are up and running. If they were that concerned, they would not be permitted by the health unit. Why is the school board listening to the recommendations? 2, if the health unit continues to recommend a no return policy in October, will you continue to deny our students these opportunities? And 3, when will the best interests of our students be put first? When will the board trust teachers and coaches to run safe activities? Thank you for letting me speak this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Any questions of clarification for our speaker this evening? Seeing and hearing none, thank you for joining us, Mr. Moore, and sharing your thoughts.
Thank you very much.
Next, we will have Shannon
Unknown participant is now
Peltier.
exiting.
Is that what that is? Peltier. We have Polisher Street, which is, yeah, Pillette, Pierre, Peary, Polisher. As Trustee Higginson, I have a particular need to get a last name right.
Hello? Unknown participant is now joining.
Hello, is this Shannon? Shannon, how do you pronounce your last name?
Peltier.
Peltier. Thank you very much. Ms. Peltier, you will have 5 minutes to address the board, and I will start my timer when you begin.
Okay, thank you. Just want to say thank you to the board for taking my call and for considering my topic for discussion. My name is Shannon Peltier, and I have a special needs son who attends a secondary school within the Windsor-Essex Public School Board. My son has significant special needs, including a diagnosis of epilepsy. I would like the public board to review and amend the current medication policy, which states that no staff can administer a PRN, also known as an as-needed type of medication to students, with the exception of an EpiPen and an inhaler for asthma. It should be noted that both the EpiPen and inhaler exceptions were made because of unfortunate situations where a student had trauma as a result of not having the medication available. Many persons living with epilepsy require rescue PRN medication when they have a history of having convulsive type seizures that can last a prolonged period of time. Once the rescue medication is administered, it starts to act immediately to help reduce the symptoms of the seizure. Without the administration of the rescue medication, there is risk of choking, difficulty breathing, stress on internal organs, and lack of oxygen to the brain. If a seizure continues for 5 minutes, there is an extreme risk for long-lasting medical complications and even can be fatal. There is no risk to a student with epilepsy to receive a rescue medication. I think we all can agree that the bigger risk to the student would be not administering the rescue medication during crucial minutes waiting for EMS services to arrive. In an effort not to make another exception to the non-administration of a PRN rule by having an unfortunate accident happen, I think we need to be proactive and change the policy now. I do not want to make this personal about how this policy has negatively affected my child and family, but I would like to acknowledge that there are currently students who are enrolled in schools with the public board who have had years of full disclosure of epilepsy. However, this year in particular, they have been denied access to school because they cannot be administered their specifically prescribed PRN medication should they have a seizure. This is unacceptable and discriminatory against students with epilepsy, as they too have a right to education in Ontario and to attend a school in an inclusive and safe environment. Although the school board is actively addressing each of these students' situations this year, and I do feel efforts are being made to get these specific students into school, which I am sincerely appreciative and grateful of, I worry about the years to come for future students with epilepsy and when we will have to revisit this policy and advocate as parents for our children to attend time and time and year again. Children with epilepsy already can experience many educational and social setbacks because of their disability. They should not have to have an additional roadblock to face at school just because they have a need to be rescued when in a position of vulnerability. In closing, please revisit this policy and make the appropriate changes regarding this PRN component. Windsor Essex is the only school board in Ontario who has not updated their policy. I also understand this topic was addressed back in 2016 with the board, and the policy was not changed for whatever reason. But I'm hoping today I was able to bring things a bit clearer as to why this policy needs to be changed and updated this year. I do not want a child's epileptic trauma to be the reason why exceptions and changes finally happen. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Peltier. Any questions of clarification for our speaker this evening? Seeing and hearing none. Thank you, Ms. Peltier, for joining us this evening and for sharing your voice. Thank you.
Thanks.
So we do have our third
Unknown
speaker,
participant is now exiting.
Ms. Margaret Hawkins.
Unknown participant is now joining.
Hello, Ms. Hawkins. We can hear you.
Hi.
Hi. You'll have 5 minutes, and I'll begin my timer when you begin speaking.
Great. Thank you. Good evening, Chairperson Higgison, Director Kelly, trustees, and senior administration team. My name is Margaret Hawkins, and I am a board employee and a union leader. However, it is not in either of those capacities that I am speaking tonight. This evening, I am speaking to you as a parent and a community member. 20 years ago, my husband and I chose Amherstburg as the place to raise our family. My children have flourished and grown into young adults that I am immensely proud of. We, of course, did not raise them alone. We raised them as part of a community that we have grown to love. Their experiences at Anderton and General Amherst have helped mold them into the caring and responsible people they are today. Over this past weekend, it came to my attention that members of my community were being called to defend the name of their beloved high school. Through social media, a call went out for people to contact trustees and demand the name Amherstburg High School be chosen for the new school. I will not delve too deeply into this post. However, I will say that the post, as it was read as it was a member of the naming committee writing it, and it was not. Social media can be a terrific way to communicate and connect to others. However, as we all know, it can also be a vehicle to spread misinformation. Clearly, the person who created this post was trying to play on the emotions of former students. As in many small towns, the high school is often the heart of the community, and General Amherst is no different. With a new building to replace the aging school and to accommodate the merger of General Amherst and Western, it was with great excitement and optimism that many in the community were looking forward to a new name as well. Upon learning the history of our town and high school's namesake, many people, including myself, were shocked and horrified. Knowing now what we do about Jeffrey Amherst and his role in the attempted genocide of the Indigenous population, we must all pledge to cease from using his name in any new ventures. I would love to see the town's name changed as well. However, that will be a fight for another day. I can and do empathize with the community members who want to hold on to a name. Change is not always easy. My own high school, Forster Secondary School, no longer exists. However, my memories, the friendships that started there, and the learning that happened during those years will stay with me forever. The legacy of J.L. Forster continues to this day in the accomplishments and endeavors of the people who passed through those doors, just as the legacy of General Amherst High School will continue, no matter what the name of the new school is. Let us, as a community, not squander this opportunity to put the name Amherst into the past and do our part to help heal those who are still suffering the ongoing effects of the racist policies the Indigenous people have endured for centuries. In closing, I would like to let you know that the members of the naming committee do not speak for me and do not speak for the entire community. I am confident in the process of naming the new school and I look forward to our board and community taking a step towards reconciliation. Thank you for affording me this opportunity to speak to you tonight.
Thank you, Ms. Hawkins. Any questions of clarification for our speaker this evening? Seeing and hearing none, thank you, Ms. Hawkins, for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
A few minutes for...
Hearing none, thank you, Ms. Hawkins, for joining us this evening.
Oh, it's me.
Thank you.
Unknown participant is now exiting.
We all hate our own voice when we hear it on a recording. Thank you very much. We're moving through our agenda to new business. We're at L1, Policy and Regulation, Trustee Code of Conduct. The recommendation is as it is before you. Do I have a motion? Someone to put it on the floor. Trustee Sipcar, any seconder? Trustee Cook, any discussion on this item? Trustee Sipcar.
So if trustees would recall, this was brought forward to the board in June, and it was deferred till this meeting so that Trustee Hatfield and I could have a chance to connect. And that did not happen. We connected briefly today around it, but unfortunately, we didn't have that opportunity. And so what I suggested to Trustee Hatfield, in light of just the length and I would say breadth of the comments, that we refer this back to the policy committee, the next upcoming policy committee, and that Trustee Hatfield can present her concerns, her comments there, and then we can have the discussion at that place. And then in order to bring back a more fulsome policy, rather than have that discussion here tonight. So I'm looking for support to refer this back to policy committee.
Do we have support to do that, Trustee Hatfield? So on the...
Madam Chair,
Pardon me?
Madam Chair, Burgess would like to speak to that referral.
So what we have on the floor right now is a referral back to policy committee. Trustee Burgess?
Okay. I support the referral back to policy. Next policy meeting may be a little premature, and the reason why I suggest that is the Trustee Code of Conduct is also under review provincially. So we can keep improving, but there are going to be some provincially, done amendments, suggestions, etc., and they will be discussed somewhat at this weekend's Board of Directors meeting for OPSPA, but also within the policy development work team. So it's just a matter of timing for the next policy committee versus the actual referral.
Thank you for that. I think we can probably refer it back to policy committee and discuss at policy committee whether we need to have, whether it needs to be discussed at that point or deferred on our agendas. But I do appreciate and take that comment. Trustee Hatfield?
Just in support of the deferral, and that's good to know about OPSPA also coming up with perhaps a revised template. But previously, when it was on our agenda, back in June, I think it was, I do know that there were some other trustees who shared my concerns, so it's not just coming from me, but I'm able to present those concerns to the committee for consideration. So it's not just me, but there are some others who share the concerns.
Thank you for that. And as Trustee Sipcar is chair of the policy committee, as she noted, those policy committee meetings are open for attendance for everyone. There are voting members, but of course all trustees are welcome to come and are given the notice of the meeting ahead of time, and you're of course all welcome to come and share those. I note that this has come back to our agenda several times, so it would be really great if we could hammer out those details of the concerns that trustees have at that venue all together, and then allow the policy committee to do its work there and bring back something that's good for the board. So any other discussion on referring that back to policy committee? Seeing and hearing none, the motion on the floor is to refer this back to policy committee. All in favor? Thank you very much. So we are at notice of motion L2. I will not read the full recommendation as it's in front of you here. Trustee Sipcar, are you looking to put that motion on the floor? Do we have a seconder for that? Trustee Cook. Trustee Sipcar, would you like to speak to it?
Sure, thank you. And also, I would like to just offer a few amendments based on conversations with trustees and also Director Kelly, just around certain minor points. Firstly, I did just want to communicate that the intention of this motion, or I should say the substance of this motion was derived from the Thames Valley District School Boards who had a similar motion. And so some of it I think reads a bit clunky, so I just wanted to make a few kind of, I guess housekeeping notes there. Firstly, in the second paragraph, the last the last four words, I would strike, so as determined by the committee. I think that is a little bit, it alludes to a committee that, in fact, the second motion speaks to, but that they're not really necessarily tied in that way, and one comes before the other. So I just thought it'd be more, it would just be easier to strike it altogether. I think secondly, in the third paragraph, there's kind of a sentence fragment that just says include provisions for public reporting on progress towards achieving outcomes in the strategy on a monthly basis. As it is a sentence fragment, I would just offer the amendment that after the word stakeholders would be a semicolon. So then it would be semicolon, include provisions for public reporting, and then another semicolon after the word basis. So that it's just it reads more of as a list. And then finally, the last comment there, in discussions with Director Kelly, she made note that January 2022, she asked if it could be May 2022. And I can ask her to speak to that specifically why, but I know that there's some work being done that she wants it to coincide with and kind of align with.
Yeah, we would be having a diversity audit, and so this would make sense that we would do consultation, and this would be all part of our plan. And so our timelines for that could be earlier than that, but I would think it would be a March or April kind of timeframe to finish that up. And I think that needs to inform us. The other thing that we're working on, of course, will be our staff census and then eventually our student census. So all of these things, we could have certainly much more to inform the board and ourselves by moving that date. But we do have a very detailed plan of where we're going. I know that Superintendents Howitt, Houston, and Canty and I talked just yesterday about this. So that would assist if we could do that.
So, Trustee Sipcar, is that an amendment on the floor here to strike as determined by the committee, to add a semicolon after the word stakeholders in the third paragraph, a semicolon after the word basis in the third paragraph, and to change January 2022 to May 2022?
Yes.
Do I have a seconder for that? Trustee Leclerc, any discussion on that amendment? I do appreciate that that touch base ahead of time. That really helps to clarify some of those questions that trustees may have had. So we have that amended motion on the floor. Any discussion on the amended motion? Trustee Sipcar?
Yeah, I'll just speak to it more generally. So I think that we heard loud and clear from our community in June certain concerns that we had. And one of the things was that we don't have a place where all of the specific objectives and measurable outcomes of our action are. You know, in developing a policy, we don't necessarily get to see the outcome of that as trustees. And this is a place, house all of that, for lack of a better term. I think that as a trustee, I'm really leaning on our administration to report to us about how we're getting where we want to go, not just where we want to go. And so I think this is a way for us to understand, how we're actually going to get there and what are the outcomes that we're looking for, and then how we are making progress to achieving those outcomes. So that's the intent behind it. And I know that Director Kelly has already started on some of this and plans to align other work underneath this. And so I hope that trustees will support it to move this work forward.
Thank you very much. Any other questions or discussion on this amended motion?
Burgess.
Go ahead, Trustee Burgess.
To the mover and supporter, back in 2017, the province debuted the Education Equity Action Plan for all school boards, and I know we certainly discussed it and looked at it in December of 2017 at GECPIC, because the Patrick Case, who is the, I'm sorry, I forget his title with this.
Assistant Deputy Minister.
Thank you, Assistant Deputy Minister, and of course, head of the Secretariat, the Education Equity Secretariat, and still very active in that role, even with the change of government. So I'm wondering, will you be encouraging using that template, which is pretty prescriptive and really kind of comprehensive of all the working parts of the school board that should see things through the lens of education equity? And do you find that that's a helpful template, and do we anticipate that our board will be using that now? It's been around for a while, and we've never really had it reported upon in that regard, but it really is a very handy template.
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, we would be using that. We have actually used that to some degree. Could we use that more effectively? One of the examples, I'm pretty sure the demographic data is in that action plan, and that is a commitment we have for this year as well. So yes, it provides, and thank you for the mention of that, because it does provide a good plan for the province and for the boards as to where they should be going. So yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. Anything further from trustees on this amended motion in front of us? I will just note that I'm in support of this, and I thank Trustee Sipcar for putting it on the floor in response to our community's concerns, and in support of the work that we do and the strategic priorities that we have committed to as a board. So on that, I will welcome Trustee Halverstadt back into the room, and I will call the vote on the amended motion in front of us. All in support.
Support Burgess.
And that motion passes.
Support Burgess.
Thank you to you all on the phone. We hear you loud and clear. Thank you very much, and that passes. Moving forward to L3, we have notice of motion of Trustee Sipcar's. I will not read that long one either. Does anyone want to put that one on the floor? Trustee Sipcar, does that one have support? Trustee Cook. Trustee Sipcar, would you like to speak to it?
Sure, yes, please. So I want to make note of two things. One thing I heard from fellow trustees was that this recommendation didn't make mention of our current existing diversity officer, and that from some of the trustees who have been here a little bit longer, that this individual has been involved in this work for many years. And the recommendation was made that they should potentially be included. So I offer it to trustees to see if there is a willingness to add that as an amendment. The other thing that I wanted to address was that you'll note that Director Kelly at our last meeting, or was it last meeting? Yes, made note of that there was already this committee that had already kind of been formed already, or I should say that the loosely in terms of the committee structure, but that applications and things were going out. And in our discussion, she asked if that was a similar, basically are these two things aligned? And I think that they are, and I wanted to hear from trustees on that as well. I think the critical thing for me is that this committee is majority of community members who feel that they have a strong voice in not just being consulted, but actually helping to co-create some policy and programs that we have within our board. And I think that that's the intent behind this motion, is to give voice in a similar way that we have done with our Indigenous community through our Indigenous Education Advisory Committee. So that's the intent behind this. And I don't know if Director Kelly wants to speak to that anymore, but I know the work has kind of already started, and I do see them as being aligned, but other trustees are welcome to comment on that as well.
If I could, through you, Madam Chair, yes. We did solicit people from the staff to come be part of an equity and inclusion committee, a sort of a central working committee, and I am looking to Superintendent Howe could probably explain this better than I could. And But there would be offshoots from that group. We would be going to IAC to ask for information, to get an opinion, to get some consultation. We'd be going to the Anti-Black Racism Committee to get some consultation. So depending on the issue, there would be movement for consultation, because this would be more of a working committee. So Superintendent Howard, you could speak to it better than I could, but certainly consultation would be at the heart of it.
Thank you, Madam Director, and I thought you did a wonderful job of explaining it. But essentially, it's that the members of the committee, we did put a message out on behalf of Superintendent Houston and Canty and myself, asking members of our community of staff from all different employee groups to consider self-electing and declaring interest to sit on the committee. Focus would be on individuals with the lived experience, and we're hoping for representation from various communities, the 2S LGBT community, the Islamic community, the Black community, the Indigenous community, and so on. As representative of this working group, we imagine the working group to be approximately 12 to 15 people. And the idea would be for regular consultation with our already established groups and community partnerships, the IEAC, SEAC, Student Senate, the Anti-Black Racism Committee, the Islamic community, the 2SLBG2 community, as well as the Asian community, for regular consultation on the work that we're doing, professional development, resource development, policy development. So constant communication with our valued partners in doing the work. But this committee would be a working committee.
So just to clarify, and so I understand correctly, so there's kind of a nucleus, like a core committee that then reaches out to all these other subcommittees. And I don't think that's entirely captured in this motion. However, I think the work related to equity and inclusion in terms of anti-Black racism and things like that is being captured at the committee level of that group that then is majority community members, and that gets fed into the would it be the Equity and Inclusion Advisory Committee, if I'm understanding? And it's made up of staff members primarily. Okay.
Thank you. I do have a question from Trustee Sartori.
Thank you. So I just want to start by saying that I'm really happy with both of these motions that have been brought forward this evening, both L2 and L3. I think they are very worthwhile, of course. I think they're very important, and I think they're very well. Constructed as well. So kudos to Trustee Sipcar for bringing them forward. I noted that policies are identified as part of the motion, and I guess I'm wondering how different policies would be selected for the work of this committee. And the reason that I'm asking is I'm wondering, as a specific example, whether this recommendation with the mention of policies include equity-related policies other than the ones listed as examples, such as the school and facility naming and renaming policy. So would that potentially be included in this work?
Sure, I can answer that question in terms of the contents of the motion. Those were meant to be examples, and I really do take your point and think that that would be a very appropriate item as a policy to add to that list. I wonder if there are more that we're not thinking about and not adding tonight. That maybe that would be something as a recommendation that would come back to the board as work of this committee or something like that, that these are the policies that they want to be commenting on or things like that. I just think that I agree with you on this one in particular, school naming policy, that it would make sense to have this committee be consulted on it in every instance. And I just wonder if there are more of these types of policies and programs that we would need to be factoring in. So I'm willing to add it, but I wonder if there's a better way to go about it, I guess.
Supplemental?
Go ahead.
Thank you. I agree with that. And, that one came to mind really based on, some work that's currently being done on a school name. And we know that these things, come up occasionally. And what I sort of had in mind, I guess, in terms of prioritizing was other policies that, might relate specifically to, equity, for example, but it could potentially be even broader than that, as you've raised, Trustee Sipkar. And I think that, really whatever this committee would identify is appropriate would be appropriate work for that committee. So thank you for that. I did have one further question that's not related, so I can wait if you want.
I'll put you in the queue for second questions, Trustee Sartori, but I'll take other trustees' first questions if they have any.
Burgess in the queue for first question, please.
Go ahead, Trustee Burgess.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I have similar thoughts and concerns regarding other opportunities. I would really like to exhaust as much as we can the existing regular committees that we have, and we already referred to an ad hoc committee of, the naming committee, but I'm thinking not only the ones that Superintendent Howard suggested, but I think GECPIC would be an essential consulting body. I think that the Supervised Alternative Learning Committee would be very important. The Discipline Committee, it talks about disciplinary policies and procedures, etc. I think that they would have some valuable input. There was a mention of adding the, I think it was referred to as the diversity officer. I made sure that I looked it up on their staff directory there, and it's the equity and inclusion officer. I believe that that's an essential part to this committee. And I would also like to add, we don't really meet that much, but quite honestly, the AODA committee, anything that has to do with any kind of disability and exceptionality, I think is also important to consult with. And these are existing. I think it's almost, that's not exhaustive. I'm sure there are others. And my understanding, if you could help me, is that any policies that any of these committees have that they would like to see changed on their committees to be included in the Equity Action Plan that is referred to in this motion, I think is helpful. So some of these changes may happen on their committees as a result of the consultation, and they can come forward from those committees through policy or whatever. But certainly an inventory of what programs we have and where the gaps are, and any initiatives. I know there are initiatives in all of these things that we rarely report on publicly, but again, to say the good things that are happening and also where the gaps are. So I strongly support this, but I would add the words equity inclusion officer after somewhere in that list. Community members, students, community members, equity and inclusion officer, trustees, administration, and parents, guardians. I would put that in there as an amendment. Thank you.
So Trustee Burgess has put an amendment on the floor to, after the word community members, add equity and inclusion officer, comma. Any support for that amendment? Trustee Sipkar. Any discussion on that amendment on the floor to add, again, we're adding after community members, comma, equity and inclusion officer, comma. The rest will read as is. Trustee Hatfield?
Just for clarification, that's the staff person that we have currently, not the new one?
I would like to leave that open because we will have a new person very shortly, I hope, in this role. And so equity and inclusion staff could be you know what I mean? There would be more than the one position. So we are in the process of hiring someone.
The amendment is equity and inclusion officer. It's specific. The amendment is a specific position.
As the mover, may I speak?
Trustee Burgess, go ahead as the mover.
Yeah, as the mover, my intention is that we have a very valuable staff resource existing. I believe the department should be enlarged, and that's why I supported the budget in June to include an additional position.
We don't have the name or anything about the new position. So I think I'm quite amenable to equity and inclusion staff, because I would hope that that's an additional staff member. So not to be specific, but certainly to include the existing very valuable resource that we have in our equity and inclusion officer. So I'm happy to amend the amendment to say equity and inclusion staff, understanding that it includes our existing equity inclusion office. Thank you.
So rather than amending an amendment, are you okay with rescinding your original amendment and putting on the floor equity and inclusion staff?
I have a new amendment to include the word equity inclusion staff. Equity and inclusion staff.
And as a seconder, Trustee Sipcar, are you okay with that? Thank you. So that amendment is on the floor to add community members, comma, equity and inclusion staff, comma. Any discussion on that amendment on the floor? I will call the vote on that amendment. All in favor of that amendment? And that passes.
Urges support.
Thank you. So we have an amended motion on the floor, and we are back to discussion on that amended motion. I do have a second question already in the queue for Trustee Sartori, so I'm looking for anybody's first question before we move on. I do have a first question. I'm supportive of this this committee, and I'm supportive of the efforts that have gone on to kind of think through how existing committees, newly formed working groups, and this perhaps new committee overseeing the work that we've just agreed to a few minutes ago, that it might be kind of nebulous in scope and in execution. And I like that this recommendation talks about community members being kind of the driving force behind the work that we're doing, as the work that we are doing directly affects our community members. So my question is, if you can describe for me, kind of play out the flow chart of how our existing committees, our existing working group, or our newly forming working group, and this committee would work together. I'm cognizant of the fact that, well, two things. As committees grow, to your point about the working group, as committees grow, sometimes the work sort of grinds to a halt a little bit, and I really want this work to be able to kind of flow through. And so I note that this committee kind of gets quite large, and we may be able to use our existing committees and our relationships that we have within those existing committees that include community members and some of these other trustees, students, administrators, parents, and guardians. And so to reduce some of the workload on both administrators trying to tackle several layers of committees that are reporting up to this thing, and to reduce the load on community members who would want to be a part of this, but may also in addition be part of several committees that we currently have, or are interested in some of those things, and the workload on community members from our board. I'm just trying to get a sense before we agree to kind of take this on, that it's not going to be just a repetition for our community members and for people on our other committees, and that it's going to be able to flow through, and that they have structures in place that we aren't going to be repeating some of the work at the committee levels that we have. So if you can kind of describe to me how those layers we have at the committee level, our newly forming working group, and this potential committee, how you see those kind of working together, would be really helpful for me to be able to visualize this.
Thank you for the question. We haven't worked out all the details, but there's a couple of ways that we could go with it. We wanted to keep the working committee a manageable group that meets regularly, and we also don't want to place too much pressure on our community partners in doing the work. So that committee would meet, I believe we have it every last Tuesday of the month. I'm looking for confirmation on that. And then the idea would be that we might create several meetings, larger meetings in the year to communicate formally with all of our community members. But then we already have the established groups that we do work with. monthly the IEC meets, regularly the Senate meets, regularly SEAC meets. So we can go out and consult with those already established meetings where those members are there. We could also create, like I said, maybe 3 or 4 meetings a year where we're bringing everybody together from the community or representatives from those community groups to do overall presentations on the work that we're doing. What we don't want to have is a cast of thousands that muddles us getting to doing the work. I think that's the premise of what we're thinking. The goal is communication, the goal is transparency, the goal is consultation in the work that we're doing in dismantling colonialism within our system. And as you discuss the policies, it's all policies. It's not just equity-related policies. And if you want to dismantle colonialism in a system, you need to look at every juncture within the system to do that, looking at the language of those policies. So this working committee is a working committee. And we anticipate that we just sent a reminder to the system of people to self-declare because it's due on Friday. We already have many people that have said they're interested. We probably will have a working committee and then helpers to that committee of ad hoc groups to do work. So the idea is working collaboratively and consulting, transparency, and getting the work done, really getting the work done.
Thank you very much for that. I appreciate that. I don't even have a follow-up. That was very good. Thank you. Anybody else have a first question before I move on to Trustee Sartori? Seeing and hearing none. Trustee Sartori, go ahead with your second question.
Thank you. And I think I may already have my answer based on Superintendent Howitt's previous response. But through you, Madam Chair, I'm also wondering if the work of this committee could also potentially include advising the board on budget consultation strategies. I'm not sure if we have a specific policy on it, but just considering some of the major work that this board does and the purpose of this motion, and the fact that our budget consultation process is such an important piece of work, I'm wondering if the budget consultation process could be something that this committee could advise on as well.
Through you, Madam Chair, I don't see why that couldn't happen, especially when this committee is identifying priorities and looking at what things are important to the system. They could certainly make recommendations about the board's focus in the budget to be able to support those initiatives.
So if I could clarify?
Go ahead, Trustee Sartori.
Clarify, Madam? Okay, thank you. So I think that partially answers my question if I understood the response that certainly this could be a committee that would be consulted on the budget, which was, I think, the answer that was just provided. But I'm wondering if they could also advise us on our budget consultation process, right? So, sort of ideas on community outreach beyond that committee on budget consultation. I know that we do some of that now, but we do a lot of work in it, but I'm just wondering if it could be an opportunity for this community or for this committee as well to advise on, broadening those processes in a community, ensuring, the level of engagement that maybe we would like to see with the budget consultation process as well. So I was really asking about the consultation process itself.
Through you, Madam Chair, thank you for the question. I have to think about that. I see them as somewhat separate, but I see how they're related. I guess I was answering the question specifically with respect to what are the priorities and how could that committee identify priorities. So you're looking more at the consultation process for the budget. But I think they could relate. I think we might want to look at just the budget consultation process in and of itself as a separate entity would be my thinking, and Superintendent Armstrong might have other ideas. But while they're related, I think if we want to get good feedback on the budget consultation, it might be a bit of a separate idea. That's an interesting question you asked, though. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And just one last comment on that. One of the reasons that I was asking is that I do have a motion coming up, which I think will be at the next Finance Committee meeting that was specifically on looking at our budget consultation process. But if there was an opportunity for this committee to take on that work, I would withdraw that motion. But if it makes more sense on the advice of the director, on the advice of admin, to keep those separate, then I can do that as well. I can keep it on the next agenda.
Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Sartori. We'll have a conversation about that as we kind of consider some of that thinking. I appreciate that. Trustee Sipcar?
I don't need to speak. That was trustees. I was going to just say that makes a lot of sense to keep it separate at the next Ops and Finance meeting. I think we can dovetail these together, and then it's specifically dealt with. Then I like that better.
That's great. Okay, so I will put one last call out for questions or comments on this motion, the amended motion, before I call for the vote.
Burgess, second question.
Go ahead, Trustee Burgess.
So, from very good discussion. So, my thoughts are that we have existing mechanisms, and in addition to our budget, which obviously is generally closer to 2022, leading up to that are our GSN consultations, and that's something that we try to send to the ministry, anticipating some of the initiatives that we're trying to accomplish, and without trying to, scrape from one line to another. It's a matter of prioritization. So not only our budget consultations, but our GSN consultations for the ministry as we take these things on. We have already identified in our strategic plan that equity and inclusion and diversity are a lens that we're going to look at all of our things through. So our existing committees, like the GSA, the SEAC, GECPIC, Anti-Black Racism, SAL, Discipline, IEC, the Senate, AODA, all of them, including Education Committee and Operations and Finance, I think all have a spot on their agenda to ask those committees. And they can, if they want to have a brief report at any of our standing committees or whatever, can also bring it forward so that they're already doing their work. They're already convening. It's just an additional item on their agenda, an unusual one maybe for SAL or discipline or whatever, but throughout the year for GSN and budget, that we can really kind of focus and see what our priorities are so that we can pick a doable thing so that when we go forward, we can phase in some of these things and prioritize them. I just don't want to waste time in the logistics of it. We have so many existing things, so I'd like that thought about. Thanks.
Thank you, Trustee Burgess.
Is it possible to do that? That would be my question.
Is it possible to do that?
Consider GSNs as well as budget.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, I think those timelines on the GSN consultations are pretty tight, but we could certainly, look at that at some of those committees. I have to think about that one too, because usually their timelines are pretty tight. And I'll be honest, some of the GSN consultations, I'm not sure how consultative sometimes they really are, but that being said, we can put our priorities in.
Thank you for that. That was a great fulsome discussion, trustees. I appreciate that. I will be calling the vote on this amended motion in front of us. So just so everybody is aware of the amendment that that we are voting on, it is as you read it in your package, but it now includes after community members, comma, equity and inclusion staff, comma, trustees administration. Then it reads regular. So all in support of that motion as amended.
Support, Burgess.
Thank you. Anyone else from the phone?
Support, Olmsted.
Thank you very much.
Support, Sartori.
Thank you very much, and that passes. Thank you, trustees. Moving through to L4, Special Education Advisory Committee board approve association application for membership as presented to serve on the Special Education Advisory Committee of the Greater Essex County District School Board from 2018 to 2022. We have a mover, Trustee Cook, and a seconder to put that on the floor. Trustee Halberstadt. Any discussion on this? Trustee Hatfield.
Thank you. I have a question to administration. So did we do advertising recently looking for additional associations, or did this just happen to come in?
That's a great question. Through you, Madam Chair. We advertise every fall. And so we did advertise, and the Brain Injuries Association was very interested in rejoining our SEAC. They have been on it before. They did a lot of work with us around the concussion policy. So they did respond to our advertisement.
So further to that then, there was, I know because I brought this up a while back about the method that we used to advertise, and that I didn't feel that we were reaching out to the community as well as we could with regard to seeking organizations to sit on SEAC, and that just advertising on the board's website wasn't enough. So I'm just wondering what you did recently to advertise.
Certainly. So we did advertise on the board's website, of course, but also we use social media, all of our social media platforms to advertise as well, and that's how they saw it.
One more, Trustee Hatfield.
And the question is, I thought that there was a decision by the Board of Trustees that we would actually advertise in the Windsor Star. I thought that was a decision we had made back when this discussion first came up. So I don't know if we can research that, but I was pretty sure that that was a decision of the trustees.
Through you, Madam Chair, I'm not aware of that, and I don't know, maybe Ms. LaBeouf is, but our social media gets us certainly a lot more hits than stuff, and the Windsor Star is quite expensive for that. I'm not aware of a motion for that. I think we've often done it through the website, but I think it's become better through the social media, if I'm correct in saying it's more broadly advertised. Would that be correct, Superintendent Wilcox?
Oh, you are correct, Director Kelly, and what was I going to say? Sorry, I lost my train of thought there. You are correct, and also it is in the regulations that we will use our board platforms.
Thank you very much. Any other questions on L4 from trustees? Seeing and hearing none, I will call the vote on L4. All in support? And that passes. I realize that our those of us on the phone may be a little late there, but it passes as in the room here. Moving forward to reports to be received. Report of the Director of Education. Director Kelly.
Thank you very much. Through you, Madam Chair. You will have received in your package quite a detailed 2020-21 operational plan. This plan reflects the goals set out by the senior team under the guidance of the Board of Trustees and under the categories reflected in our previous strategic plan. Despite valiant attempts last year, I know the disruptive year did pose a challenge in meeting some of those goals. The lack of EQAO data, the constant pivot made for another challenging year, but I will highlight a few of the successes. Believe me, I'm not going to go through this whole thing or you'll all be asleep. But I do remain motivated and by the dedication of our staff, our students, and families who rose during these times. In the area of confident learners, we usually talk about a lot of the assessments here, but you will see that through some of the assessments, we were able to show growth. As you'll note, probably in the first few pages of the 50, 60-page document there, you'll see some growth in the areas of mathematics and literacy, and particularly in the primary and junior areas. In addition, we are pleased to see some gains made by our ESL students who have moved up in their steps, and again, we've made a committed effort to really support our ELL learners. Summer learning continues to be a really big thing in this board and is much larger here than it is in a lot of Ontario school boards. It continues to be a significant place for our students to learn in the summer. Our commitment to supporting our French immersion students as well as our Indigenous students, again, is continued to be supported by our families. And in the secondary panel, summer school and the Reach Ahead programs remain popular. And in an effort to both support both practice and promoting of positive behaviors, I'd like to feature something from the Special Education Department and the work of our behavior management team. This past year, they worked hard to initiate the My Way program. You may have remembered, I think it was Samantha Mulcaster who presented that to the board. And the program really enabled the board to support complex and challenging learners with autism so that they could extend their day and that they could meet with success in the classroom. The data that came from that, both staff and students, parents saw an improvement in attendance, in behavior, and in student communication. So I'd just like to acknowledge this year our behavior management team, and they were able to present at the ABA network and shared their work in a school setting, and where 6 other boards have replicated that work. So that's a celebration. Our continued work, you can see through here in the operational plan, is demonstrated through things like Arts Can Teach. We still continue to support those programs. You will also note some themes of acting responsibly to self and others through good citizenship. Our work in the areas of bullying prevention and character education, I think, reflect that. Engaged communities was one of our priorities, obviously, and while we know that we have much to do, much work ahead to listen to our communities, we also work to ensure that our communication on the area of translation of documents, for example, I noticed on page 30, and the assistance of our Swiss workers in speaking with our families about the different learning models, for example, are just some of the examples. I think you'll also note that while there were not as many good stories to share last year because there weren't kids in schools, and that's always the focus, we're very pleased to have increased our media presence significantly with a new communications officer, and it's really enhanced our social media communication. And again, I know that was something that was important to the Board of Trustees. You'll notice on page 49 that we have continued to ensure all of our students were able to gain understanding of Indigenous literature and our NBE grade 11 English courses. We've increased the resources there, but I think this is the year 4 of the implementation across our system for that course. And I think you'll also see that the report reflects some of the work completed in the area of diversity, equity, and inclusion as we work to broaden our understandings and extend that work into the upcoming years. Last year, a busy year for the HR department and a number of our superintendents. Last year saw the completion of collective agreements across all bargaining groups as we worked together with our union partners. And so we were often ahead of the province in solving those agreements with the good relationships that our HR department and our superintendents have with our unions. So it was a good experience, though not always easy. Ethical stewardship. I really want to give a big shout out to our facilities staff because they work so hard in so many areas. You'll note the extensive work they've done on capital projects. We have so much going on in the world of capital projects for an Ontario school board, and so I just want to say that those people have really given a lot of their time. They've also demonstrated a commitment to energy savings, and they've the partnership with the program department implementing the eco schools, the stewardship mission and vision, the eco teachers. There were something like, when I looked at 326 virtual visits, virtual sessions presented to 4,500 students. Again, a commitment and a nice partnership between the boards. In addition, there's been work in the area of single-use plastics and active transportation as well. And again, that work came from the Board of Trustees' suggestions, I believe. So those are very few highlights of a very comprehensive operational report. The goals that you'll see in October that we are going to be presenting for the new strategic plan will show some new dimensions. And if you have your balls, those are the new dimensions. Those are the new dimensions that we'll be tossing around. And as a senior team, we will be developing what we hope will be a little slimmer, but we're working together to really streamline each other's goals and to see how they link effectively. And we will be happy to present this at the next meeting. And the balls were just part of the Equity Juggling Act that happened on our Professional Development Day on September 2nd. So those are a few highlights from a very dense report, and the senior team would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Director Kelly, and allow me to say a sincere thank you to senior administrators, to Director Kelly, for not only this comprehensive report as you give us every year, but for the contents that are contained within it and those that mystify and do not make it into this report that you spent. Your time, your heart, and your dedication and professionalism to making sure that our students and staff have great experiences in all of the places that our schools and classrooms take place nowadays. And I very much thank you on behalf of the Board of Trustees. I think they would agree with me that the exceptional effort that we see probably belies the stuff that we don't also get to see, the work that gets done and the stuff that keeps you up at night. So thank you very much for the work that has gone into this report. All of it, even the stuff that we don't always get to see. So thank you very much for your work in that. Any questions?
Thank you to Ms. LeBoeuf, who organizes us. That's the key. I forgot to acknowledge that, but she brings this all together for us, and we appreciate it.
Very much so. We are a model in this way, the way that our operational plan is made up. We are a model across the province, and I know that Madame LeBoeuf had a lot to do with that. So, any questions from trustees on this? Trustee Hatfield.
Thank you for the report, and I do appreciate the format, and I know it's a lot of work, but I love the way that we tick off the check marks on our strategic priorities. But just one thing, a quick question. One of our goals is to reduce our energy consumption, and with all the school closures and things that happen, I just wondered why there was an increase in gas consumption. Seems everything else went down and that went up. Does that have to do with our air flow situation?
I'll try to answer that, but I do have Ms. Hinchliff on the line. So we have been running our ventilation systems longer, which is having an influence on that. And even though schools may have been closed for in-person learning, we did have our STEPS and GAIN students still attending class during those periods as well.
Oh, can you use your mic, Trustee Hatfield?
So are we anticipating that we may go over budget this year with regard to our utility consumption, or just the area of gas in particular?
We're going to be, sorry, through you, Madam Chair. We'll be bringing forward to the Ops and Finance Committee at the next meeting an update on COVID costs. And certainly running ventilation systems longer is going to create a rise in our utility costs that we are tracking separately, and we are expecting it will go up.
Any other questions from trustees? Trustee Halberstadt.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, this is quite a bulky report, and obviously, as others have said, a lot of hard work and diligence. The one thing that I did wonder was, have we moved away at all, given everything else we're doing, from our core scholastic goals? I didn't see any reference that shouted out to me of the math task force, and wonder, is that still operating with all these other committees starting up too?
I do believe we review, bring back the math task force goals every year, and that is reviewed. There are certainly goals in here on math, literacy, and writing, and some of them were harder to measure, but there certainly are in the first number of pages a significant number of goals. And also with Lexia, for example, in the reading program, there were goals there. In the area of mathematics, I do think there was something on prime in here. Superintendent, how you probably can summarize that better than I.
Thank you, Madam Director. On page 1 or page 55 of the report, it is the first item that talks about that the action steps are to continue with the implementation of the tenets within the math task force. That was the work that was continued and is continuing this year. In fact, I just sent out a memo to principals about the professional development sessions to continue to develop capacity amongst educators. And you'll note that of the sample size of students, which is over, I think, 800 students, there was increase in student performance, even in the pandemic. And that is a testament to the work of our great educators within the system and the wonderful people at the central office who help to support the learning in schools.
Thank you. That's great to hear. Is the task force actually still meeting at all? Or I know you were meeting fairly regularly when this all started up, but.
So for essentially the last 2 years, due to all the issues with COVID and so on, they have not met. I would anticipate that once things stabilize with the residual impact of the COVID experience that we're in, we would probably reconvene to look and examine at the work that we're doing. That may occur this year. It may occur at the beginning of next year. Again, determined by what we're dealing with the COVID situation.
Thank you. Any other questions from trustees? Seeing and hearing none. Thank you very much to senior administrators and to Director Kelly for that report. Now we are moving on to M2, the ventilation update that we have enclosed. Superintendent Armstrong, do you have a presentation or?
I'll just do a brief introduction. So in your package, administration has provided a report that outlines the ventilation measures that have been implemented in our schools in response to COVID-19. And we fully acknowledge the importance that a lot of our staff and families are placing on this one particular health and safety measure that we've implemented in our schools. The report outlines the status of the ventilation upgrades that have occurred to date, the procurement and distribution of our HEPA air purifiers that have been dispersed throughout the system, changes in the ventilation measures and processes that we have adopted. We've also provided a summary of the projects that are currently being undertaken, which are being funded either through our school condition improvement funding or our resiliency infrastructure funding that we receive from the federal and provincial governments. We've also provided appendices that describe the types of ventilation systems that we have in our systems and a school-by-school list of the detailed ventilation systems. I'd also like to note that on our board website, we have posted a ventilation report that parents or families or students can go and actually select their school to see the ventilation information with respect to that particular site. I'd also like to acknowledge that Ms. Juliana Hinchliff, our Manager of Facility Services, and Mr. Vince Laframboise, our Building Systems Officer, are here virtually with us, and we would be happy to answer any questions you have on the report.
Thank you very much, Superintendent Armstrong, and thank you to Juliana and to Vince for joining us this evening as well. Any questions for this team on this report? I do have one. We got a bunch of HEPA filters and units for our classrooms from the ministry. I'm wondering what happens when those break down or need repair or need filters replaced and all of that. Who pays for that?
I'll start the question and then I'll ask Ms. Hinchliff and Mr. Laframboise to chime in. We got the funding, we received, there were 20,000 units that were shipped by the province to school boards. I can't now remember the number. We received 191. Thank you, 191. I was talking in my head. So we've received an allocation of those units. We've also received some small funding, $72,000, I believe it is, which we've procured additional units for, but we have not received any money if they break. So we would pay for that. I'll turn it over to Ms. Hinchliff with respect to filter changes. I'm not sure if these units came with additional filters, so I'll ask maybe Ms. Hinchliff to address that.
Thank you very much. Through you, Madam Chair. MGCS, who has sent us the 491 Jade air purifiers to complement our 300 plus Zephyr units that we have in our system and our Guardian Air units that we have. We have a total of 832 units. Each one of these units is what we call assetized in our work order system, and each unit, depending on the make and model, requires preventative maintenance. For the Zephyr and Guardian Air units that we purchased previously prior to Christmas, we are responsible for all costs for filter changes and for maintenance. We have an excellent preventative maintenance department who actually checks these units, washes the pre-filters. We're in the process of obtaining the replacement filters for these units that we purchased previously, and I think they're due in December to be changed. And we will move through that process as we would do with any other preventative maintenance work. In terms of the Jade air purifiers that were procured through the Ministry of Education and sent to us by MGCS, it is my understanding that they will be through MGCS providing filters, I believe, for that type of work. And we would order those replacement filters through MGCS, and that for us as a board currently, there's no cost to that. But we would have to pay all labor costs for any kind of preventative maintenance on these units. So all 832 units are in our preventative maintenance program as of now.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. I note that perhaps during budget deliberations, when we send our letter to the minister, letting him know where we feel the effects of budget shortfalls, that perhaps with ventilation units in our near and far future, from what we can tell, that perhaps the government, we can add that to our list of ways that they can better support boards and student success and the safety of our staff and students. Superintendent
Has a
Armstrong?
question, Madam? I'm sorry, I was muted.
Oh, just 1 second. Superintendent Armstrong, I think, had something to add.
Certainly. I'm hopeful once we have done all the ventilation upgrades that are expected to be done by the end of November, the need for many of these units will no longer be required. Certainly we will place them, in our JK and SK spaces. We are looking at also placing these units, even though it's not required, in our gains and steps classrooms, because a lot of times some of those students may be unmasked, but certainly hopefully we won't require as many units going forward. And before we wrapped up, and I'm sorry, I just really want to acknowledge the work of Juliana and her team, and in particular Vince LaFramboise. He is completely just a rock star in my mind, and he's done awesome work for us. Thank you.
Yes, indeed. Thank you to you both. And I know it's such a huge thing as a parent, and as I've heard from many parents in my in Lakeshore and Tecumseh, and I'm sure throughout the district, that this is a major factor, ventilation, as we've learned more through science about COVID. And so I'm grateful to that team for putting all that effort into it. Trustee Burgess, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. My question is about, I guess, prioritization for schools who have not been selected for the big capital projects for ventilation upgrades, because they are stuck in that limbo of being have followed through on an accommodation review, or are now going to be consolidated and or made surplus, or waiting for capital funding for replacement and or consolidation. And there are many in our system. And of course, we wouldn't put in a large capital project in hard ventilation systems for something that we are going to be declaring surplus immediately or in the next few years. But the need is imminent. So can you assure me that you put extra prioritization on some of those old and the older schools that have no mechanical ventilation and aren't going to get these upgrades until they are closed because they're scheduled for another physical building? Have we erred on disproportionately supporting them? I hear that you're going to have extra units and we will distribute them in kindergarten and some of our congregate like spec ed rooms, but right now in these other schools that really require it, do we have enough?
Through you, Madam Chair, I'll start the question and then I'll open it up to Ms. Hinchliffe and Mr. Flamboise to chime in. You're correct. The ministry is particularly with the resiliency infrastructure funding, where a school is being replaced, we're not permitted to submit projects for mechanical ventilation upgrades for those spaces. So, and you're correct, we do have a lot of construction projects that are currently underway, and we will be closing a number of schools as a result. In all those spaces that have partial or have natural ventilation, there are HEPA units in every single classroom, office, library, and gym. They are in those spaces, and they will continue to be a priority for us until those spaces close. And with that, if Julie or Vince would like to add in, I would welcome the input. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll start. I think Mr. Lafamboise has done a much better job in determining where HEPA units are being installed. So I'll ask him to kind of give an overview on how he assessed our schools to provide appropriate HEPA air purifiers where ventilation doesn't exist, and particularly in the Kingsville, Leamington area. So Mr. Lafamboise, if you wouldn't mind.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. As previously brought forward, the CVRS funding did
Vince, I don't want to interrupt. Can you speak closer to your phone?
Oh, I can. Yeah, give me 1 second here. I'll just put my different headset on.
Thank you. We don't want to miss any of that.
Is this better?
Oh, yes, it is. Go ahead, Vince.
Oh, okay. My apologies for that. As Ms. Armstrong was noting, the CVRES funding did limit us into buildings that we were going to have for a longer period of time. With that said, when we looked at this last year and we're looking at our schools and did our reviews last summer and noted the schools with passive ventilation, kind of before there was any direction, we had gone ahead and purchased those 300 Zephyr units and the Guardian Air Angels, and those were distributed to all the schools that kind of have those passive ventilation systems. So those went out, pretty quickly. I think us understanding that although those buildings, had exhaust fans and you could open the windows and do rely on some passive ventilation through the building envelope, because that's just the way a lot of schools were made during those times. That we had an opportunity and needed to do a little bit more. And in fact, I think it was quite a bit more. We have a handful of schools that are slated for replacement and are kind of in that limbo state. So they're going to continue to keep the HEPA air units throughout their buildings where required to supplement whatever systems are already in there. Because, I think as we understand and as we continue through this, and even, I don't want to speak past the pandemic because we don't really know when that might be. Those are going to continue until, those schools, those old schools that are slated for closure and have new buildings coming for them. Until those students are moved into those buildings, we're going to maintain these systems in those schools.
Thank you very much. Trustee Burgess, do you have a supplemental?
No, Thank you very much.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions. Oh, Trustee Chin, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm not sure if you have mentioned this on page 120. When I see the projects that you made for different schools, kind of for certain schools is kind of there are a lot of work on that, like Armsburg Public Schools, and replace all existing unit ventilators with new, provide separate units ventilators for something. And we can tell that some schools, they have just a little bit works well, collegiate institute, add new ventilation unit in the gym. So only one. I don't know how you make the list of the priority, and is that based on necessity or current situations, or just based on the easy, if it's easy to change or replace? And of course, I see that it's not very balanced among those schools.
Superintendent Armstrong, you'll handle that.
I'll ask Julie and Vince to answer that. Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, I'd like to start and then open up to Mr. Lafamboise. I think the biggest statement that I can make is that every school in our system, when the projects are done, are going to have ventilation. I could not have said that prior to COVID. It has been something that we've never had the funding to do, and we've always relied on very passive ventilation systems. I think that every school now and every room that requires ventilation will have it, which is a monumental impact. Schools that you don't see on these lists already have ventilation. Our capital projects department has been working diligently for years through school condition improvement allocation funding to provide adequate ventilation and to upgrade ventilation units throughout our system to make sure that they're up to date, that they meet current building codes, and we've done great work in ventilation. And what CVRIS funding did is allowed us to actually add ventilation, which we were never able to do. But I will certainly let Mr. Lafamboise supplement that as he sees. Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. The list of projects this year, I would say, is probably one of the most aggressive list of mechanical projects that we've ever done. I've had the benefit of also being on the contractor side doing school board work for a number of years before this role. And this is certainly with our addition of mechanical ventilation to this last group of schools, probably a generational project in terms of what it's going to mean for the staff and students in those buildings, and also the opportunity, as Ms. Hinchliffe had noted, because of COVID to do it. In terms of some of the schools on this list, you had asked a question about, how do we pick? In general, there are a couple of ways that we look at it. There's a VFA report that comes through that kind of highlights the age of some of the equipment. We also have a really good idea of the age of a lot of our equipment. When I look at some of them, and I can point to a few of them here, specifically Amherstburg Public School, all pneumatically controlled, just the way that they kind of use their heating system internally, and just the age of them and them being noisy, or parts of it. And then you see providing separate units for classroom 1 and 1A. That's to improve comfort as well. So a lot of these, when we look at these replacements, it's not just, renewing the equipment, but it's also improving energy efficiency. A lot of the new equipment motors are more efficient than the old ones. So a lot of these are, a combination of, equipment that's difficult to maintain. If you scroll down the list for Bell River Public, where they were starting to have a number of failures within the units. So there are a number of criteria that play into when equipment gets replaced. I will add, this year is probably one of the most challenging in terms of getting some of this equipment in, specifically for the Walkerville gym. I actually went through 3 different designs because of some of the challenges of getting it in. And our 14 schools that because of the CVRES funding, we were able to add mechanical ventilation. We joked a number of times through the year this year that these schools were just not made to add ventilation, and we've gotten them in. And it's a real big testament to the engineers that we have that work for us and the contractors who have worked with us to get that in. These were very challenging projects. Our contractors had very many late nights getting a lot of this in. So, across the board, sometimes just replacing a piece of equipment one for one is somewhat straightforward once it's past its life. We had a number of them this year that I think if we had done a quarter of the projects that in any regular year it would have been a challenge, and we accomplished a lot of them this year.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you. And thank you to trustees and to Ms. Hinchliffe and Mr. Laframboise for joining us to answer some of those questions for us this evening. So we'll move through to agenda item M3. Actually, before we do that, I know we're 1 minute before time, but I'll note that we are at 9:10, which is a timed item for trustee question period. Are we okay just to keep moving through? Looking for nods of approval to keep moving through. Wonderful. So we will be on M3, report of the OPSPA director or delegate, Trustee Burgess.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It is an oral report. I didn't prepare a printed one, but I will summarize it and forward it on for minutes. OPSPA, despite being not in the office, has been very busy. We have already convened our working groups, the education program working team and the policy development working team, and have met. And we will be meeting with our first board of directors meeting of this school year this Saturday. But with the proroguing of Queen's Park, the legislature, some of the efforts that we had moved on, some of the items that we moved on, have actually died on the order table and will need to be reintroduced at Queen's Park once again. One of them is the Food Literacy Act, for example, but there are others. So we will be working on all the items that are on our plate, but there are some things I'd just like to highlight, if I could, very quickly, and as I said, I'll pass these on. Of course, the predominant thing before us has been the COVID-19 update and the return to school for this fall. And we've been reporting on this and taking policy positions throughout the summer and have been consulting and have been at stakeholder meetings and have had intervener status in some of the things that are before us as well. So we have, as of, the morning of September 17th, 632 cases of COVID-19 have been reported in publicly funded schools in that past fortnight. Of those cases, 526 were students, 82 were staff, 24 were not identified, and only one of 4,844 schools in the province is currently closed. Earlier this week, the Deputy Minister, Nancy Naylor, provided instructions to school boards regarding rapid antigen testing requirements for school boards to support local verification processes for testing. We want to make sure our schools are safe and protected. The Ministry of Education has required individuals subject to testing requirements under the COVID-19 immunization disclosure policy to provide verification of negative test results 2 times a week. And they sent a memo to school boards regarding that. This last Tuesday, I guess it would have been last week, the government released guidance to support the guidance to support the new vaccine passport, or rather the proof of vaccination for district systems. As I mentioned earlier, the Trustee Code of Conduct consultation is underway. It was introduced earlier in the year, but the actual stakeholder consultation that we'll be attending as a trustee association will be in October. And so we've been corresponding with ADM Didam Prue and the Leadership Collaboration and Governance Branch to share and remind ministry staff of our association's previous work on the template that was last updated in 2019. And there is an online public survey that's been posted, and that feedback deadline is November 1st, 2021. So that's what I was referring to earlier, that when we refer ours to our policy, we will be receiving something in the late fall, I imagine. Yesterday, we had a federal election. We now have a minority government, and there were some commitments that were related to things that affect us clearly. Obviously, funding for all the supports we need to get through the pandemic. We're part of every party's platform. We'll have to see how that, goes through the House of Commons. But one of the things that will affect us, and I think that we have to put it on our radar, is that there was a strong commitment by enough of the parties that were running, even in this minority government, to support affordable child care. We already have child care on our radar at all of our schools and school settings, and we work very closely with community partners in that regard. But even with planning, capital planning and child care spaces, when you get the availability of affordable $10 a day child care, as was proposed, that will make a difference to us. So I think we have to put that on our radar and either advocate, ask a lot of questions, but try to figure out how that's going to affect us over the next few years once it does make it to the discussion and action at the House of Commons. Of course, this will be the first year where there is the honoring of the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, which is next Thursday, September 30th. And this day of recognition was created by the federal government through the enactment of Bill C-5 in June to fulfill the 80th call to action, 80th out of the 94 calls of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And I will be having a question and trustee question period on what we are doing as a board to commemorate that very important day. There's lots of other news releases and information. I will report on that as I come back from the Board of Directors, and that will end my oral report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Trustee Burgess. Any questions for our OPSPA Director on her report? Seeing and hearing none, thank you, Trustee Burgess, and if you can submit anything written to us and to Madame Leboeuf for inclusion, that would be great. Moving through our agenda is my chair's report. So we are so happy to have welcomed back our students and staff the beginning of this month. Having classrooms and hallways full of laughter, creativity, and learning has helped us all ease back into a new school year with care and kindness and that little extra bit of resiliency. We hope everyone's summer break was safe and relaxing and that you got to recharge in a way that fills you up. The work of a school board obviously continues over the summer, and this summer was certainly no different. I thank our administrative team and their respective teams, as well as principals and vice principals who set up and support the exceptional work of our dedicated staff in our schools. The director and I have continued the prescient work of equity and anti-Black racism in our meetings with the Black Council of Windsor, Essex. Our strategic priority of engaging respectfully with our diverse communities is embedded in this challenging work. The Minister of Education held 2 calls with school board chairs over the summer, keeping us informed of the many changes that come with a safe return to school in the year 2021. I note that Dr. Kieran Moore joined us on one call and particularly highlighted our local health unit as a leader in evidence-based decision-making in a local context. And so thank you to WECU for their consistent leadership and partnership in that. I was delighted to celebrate Big Brothers Big Sisters of Windsor, Essex this month with a flag raising at Charles Clark Square this past Friday. We're always so proud of our community partnerships. And I posted my latest chair's message on our website and invite you to take a look. Welcome back to everyone, and thank you for filling your GEC DSB and GEVS teaching and learning spaces with your school spirit again. Your joy keeps us motivated, keeps me motivated, and thank you very much. And we'll move through our agenda to trustee question period. Any questions from trustees? Trustee Leclerc.
So earlier this evening, we heard from Shannon Pelche regarding the issue related to epilepsy and our students with epilepsy in our schools and not administering RPN. It's my understanding that we may be moving that to policy committee for review to amend so that we can proceed with administering that medication. If that's the case, I don't need to make a notice of motion, but if I need to, I'll make a notice of motion to move it to policy.
Through you, Madam Chair, I'm going to look to Superintendent Corbeck if you want to respond to that. I know you've been working on that. I think I know the answer, but I look to your expertise.
Thank you, Director Kelly. Yes, you're correct. That we are looking at and are going to be reviewing the policy on the administration of prescription medication with a particular focus on the current item that indicates that we do not administer PRN medications. Recognizing that the current policy does say that we do not administer PRN medications. I have been working with school administrators to try to resolve some of the current concerns of families in our communities and in our schools. So that work is in progress, and yes, absolutely, we'll be reviewing that regulation.
Any other questions from trustees? I've got Trustee Hatfield and then Trustee Cheen.
Thank you. So my question comes from some emails that I've received from parents as well as complaints from my grandkids. So it has to do with only getting 10 minutes to eat their lunch. Is that practice widespread throughout our schools? They take the 20-minute lunch break and split it up into two groups, and they each get 10 minutes to eat. That's what's going on. So, anybody know about it, or everybody's just looking blank?
I'm looking to Superintendent. I guess he's going to tell us.
I just thought I'd put up my hand.
Brave man.
I do know that there are some schools, in talking with some of the principals, that are having 10 minutes to eat their lunch. What's happening is because they have to eat in the checkerboard pattern, half are eating, half are not, and then it switches. And then they typically have 40-minute nutrition breaks, and then they go outside after that for 20 minutes. So I believe that's what's happening in some schools.
They're getting 10 minutes. And I confirmed that with parents. The kids are getting 10 minutes to eat, and it's not working. These little kids can hardly open their lunch pail in 10 minutes, let alone eat. So this is a problem. The parents are correct. Their kids are coming home hungry because they didn't get to eat their lunch at school.
I believe Superintendent Hillman has something to add.
Through you, Madam Chair, and I don't know the specifics of that case, but in the schools I'm visiting, nutrition break is 40 minutes. 20 minutes of that is generally spent in a classroom for eating, and 20 minutes of that is provided to students to be outside. So what happens, or what is a challenge for many schools, is we've got 20 minutes inside, and I've been instructed that I need to follow the health unit's guidelines on 6 feet distance for lunch. So the checkerboard pattern, where it applies, means every other person, you eat while you don't with your mask on, and then we switch. So I would agree that the math of that is 10. There's lots of places where, younger kids will need more of that, and it would be appropriate to move the kids farther apart. And there's other places where older kids use less of that. There's classrooms where the kids don't go outside for 40 minutes. They stay inside for 40, so they have 20 and 20. So it's not a specific rule. It's the challenge that I think some classrooms are facing around how do we make sure kids are eating half of them at a time in a spot of 20 minutes, so that other students, so that we have a chance to go outside. Certainly my recommendation to any schools who are having, it's the same problem. We could give kids 30 minutes for lunch, and I've always had a couple who needed a bit more. So we certainly should be working with those schools to make sure those individual kids get the time they need to do that.
I'm not talking about one school. I'm talking about several where I've heard from the parents. Several schools are taking that 20-minute period and chopping it in half so that half can go outside to play for an extra 10 minutes. The other half eats because of the distancing thing. So the reality is that these kids are only getting 10 minutes for their main nutrition break. And I just think that's not acceptable in our school system. I don't want to see kids going hungry because we can't come up with a better plan for our kids to eat. I think that should be a priority. And it is going on in our school. And I checked again today before the meeting, and it is going on in our schools.
Is there a question on that?
So what can we do about it? We have an obligation to make sure that our kids are also able to eat. It's not, that should be basic.
Director Kelly, are we?
I'm looking to the elementary, I think this is where it's happening in the elementary panel, correct? We can certainly take that back, but I do believe, Superintendent House, do you have something to add?
I just know that a couple of schools that I've spoke to, they're not necessarily within the 40 minutes. They're also extending outside of that, somewhat during instructional time for students to have the opportunity to eat. And I'm just wondering, I know you've mentioned several schools, but have they contacted the school principal to have those conversations with them, specifically about their concerns? Maybe it's an isolated classroom, or is it wider spread? Because I'm not sure that, we're aware of all of them, per se.
Thank you for that.
Well, yeah, if I could, I would like to know that we are going to reach out to our principals and that we are going to address it.
We can take that back and see what's actually happening out there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So I have Trustee Cheen, Trustee Burgess, and then Trustee Sartori. So go ahead, Trustee Cheen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have parent asking that for public school board, they announce the number of the cases of the positive, and together with the number of the students sent back home, dismissed from school. And the parent ask why our board does not provide the number of the students sent back to school. And she said they might need more transparency of the numbers, and so that they can know what's the situation of the school. Thank you.
Superintendent Ewander.
Thanks for the question, through you, Madam Chair. The ministry requirement is to put the positive case on the site and the date that it happened. And so that's what we do. I've adopted that model from last year, and I'm continuing it this year. I think when the bigger numbers are put on, those cases are not positive. If somebody in that cohort became positive, then the case would go on, and it would be the one person. The other is when you put those big numbers on, if you put a class of 20, class of 25, whatever it may be, you're almost making the school look like it's not as good as it really is, because there's those bigger numbers that kind of convolute how many positive cases there actually are in the school. And so my understanding is that was the reason it's done the way it is right now.
supplemental? Yeah. Oh, what I understand is that we can announce the positive cases and the number of the students sent back home, but we can particularly specify that these are just the number of students connected with the positive, but we didn't say that they are positive themselves. For the public school board, they announced the students connected with the positive cases, but we don't have that information. So I wonder how when the parents compare the two school board regarding the transparency, how will they feel that we don't report part of the numbers, but they report. It doesn't mean that all the numbers we report are positive. They just want to know how many students are dismissed from the school because of the connection with the positive cases. You understand what I mean?
Through you, Madam Chair. I do understand what you're saying. However, the choice that was made was that we put the positive cases on because the others aren't affected. Yes, they're sent home, but they're not affected as far as positive goes. And if they are, then they're put on. And again, the ministry requirement is to put the positive case on. The other board chooses to do that. I think they did last year as well, to my knowledge, and we still didn't. We did it the way we're doing it this year.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Trustee Burgess, and then Trustee Sartori. I see you, Trustee Haberstadt. Go ahead, Trustee Burgess.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And through you, if I could ask my question, I think to Superintendent Howard, if I could. We have received inquiries about, and just sort of both sides of this, about how we're going to honor the Federal National Truth and Reconciliation Day. We have some parents and families who want it to be a day off to honor it, as you know, some stores and all federal affiliated departments, you know, have the day off, and others who want it. And our position through OPSPA is to have it as a day in school, not out of school, to make it a meaningful day. So I'd like to know what we're doing next week on either during the week or on September 30th, the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, across our system. What are we doing? What activities?
Thank you for the question. You are correct that September 30th is identified as a national holiday recognizing the legacy of residential schools. And we take our direction from the ministry, and that it is a day in schools for learning. And all of next week moving up to September 30th and beyond that is around recognizing the impact of residential schools and building an understanding and respect for our Indigenous families within our communities, so that any of those actions are never repeated again. What we've done, and it was sent out, it was over a week ago, I think it's been out for about maybe 10 days now, is we sent out a detailed sway to all of our educators. And a sway is like an electronic resource, almost like super PowerPoint, with lots of resources embedded and messaging to support educators in their learning and to support the learning of students. We also have traditionally had September 30th as a day for Orange Shirt Day. This year, a community member is allowing proceeds to go to the Greater Essex County District School Board. The proceeds based on the sold shirts is about $1,500 right now, with the intent of it going to support graduates this upcoming June who are of Indigenous background within our school district. We're really happy about that. And there's a whole host of activities. There's an honor walk along the river. Hundreds of our students are making posters to be included in that honor walk. We have a presentation with Moses Lundhem around, actually that was this week, where classes signed up to engage in painting around Indigenous learning. Last year I went into schools and it was amazing the work that was across the system. There are videos, there are mentor texts at each level, and there is just a ton of information that has been sent out to schools. And the most important thing is, I agree with the OPSM position, is that it needs to be a day of learning very similar to Remembrance Day, and lest we forget the impact of what our soldiers fought for our country and our rights and our freedoms. We never want to forget that. We never want to forget what happened to Indigenous people, the impact of residential schools, and if we're never going to repeat it, I quote the Honorable Murray Sinclair, education got us into this. It's only education that's going to get us out of it, and I'm really excited about the work that we're doing. Look forward to bringing back some information to the Board of Trustees on what's happening in schools.
Do you have a supplemental, Trustee Burgess?
No, thank you. I will, I've reviewed some of it, and I look forward to all of it. Thank you very much.
Indeed, indeed. Trustee Sartori, and then I have Trustee Halberstadt. Go ahead, Trustee Sartori.
Thank you very much. Madam Chair, I think, so my understanding is that we can ask one question during trustee question period. Is that right? I have a two-parter.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Can I ask two questions related to the dismissal process?
Sorry, I missed that part.
Nope.
Can you say that again?
Could I ask two questions related to the dismissal process?
If they're related to in one question, yes. If you can loop them together, yes.
Okay. So I saw that the outbreak plan was posted. So thank you very much to admin for that. It's there's a lot of really good detailed information for parents there. I have had a couple of questions from parents about the dismissal procedures when there's a positive case. So one of them being about the length of time that vaccinated kids are out of the classroom before they are told that they no longer have to isolate. So I'm wondering if admin can, is able to provide some information on that. I don't have a clear understanding of, generally how long they are out of the classroom. But the question is coming from parents understanding that it seems to be different from what the directive is provincially. And they weren't anticipating that their kids who are vaccinated would actually be told to isolate. So I'm just wondering if admin can speak to that process a little bit.
Superintendent, I wonder.
Thanks for the question, through you, Madam Chair. So what happened was initially the health unit would go in when the kids were sent home, and they would look in the records to see if they were double vaccinated or not. And if they were and they had no symptoms, they were then able to return back to school before the final date of the letter that was sent home. However, they have been so swamped right now. I had a conversation with them, I think it was yesterday, and the model has now changed because they can't do it, is what they told me, because there's just too many. And so now the entire class, if there's a positive in the class, is going to be sent home for the 10 days. Now, and I will say though, the actual case may have been contacted previous to when the kids are sent home. So it may not be a full 10 days. It might be 5, it might be 3, depending. But nevertheless, that's the rule they have right now.
Supplemental, please.
Go ahead.
And so what kinds of work or supports do students have? I'm not really sure how to frame the question, other than, parents being concerned that, obviously concerned that their children can't, go back into the classroom for 10 days. So, but there is classwork that's provided to students to be able to do from home. Are we offering virtual in those situations, or no? because we didn't do a hybrid model.
Superintendent Hillman?
I'm happy to start with some of the general parameters. I think one of the key observations and learnings for us is that each case is highly specific. So we do have, again, some trends. This tends to happen this way, and I'm happy to share that. But the caveat to that is that the health unit assesses each individual case. Contact tracing, issues of the variant, those types of things can cause the health unit to provide different directions. Ultimately, what happens is the health unit is directing students and or staff home, and depending on those realities, we then have learning models to put in place. A sample would be a grade 4 class that gets sent home. Students tested positive, the class and the teacher get sent home. Those students would not be vaccinated, so they would be required to be at home. And as Superintendent Allender said, it could be up to 10 days, but it might be 3 days or 4 days. In that scenario, the teacher is either at home, providing a full virtual experience to the students who are at home learning. The teacher might be returned to school the next day as a double vaccinated person, and they would still have their entire class at home and be able to provide full day virtual learning for those students. We have other scenarios where a bus cohort goes home and 3 students from one class might go home. In that scenario, the other 21 students are in class. The teacher is teaching that group of 21 in person and would need to post that school work to those students who are at home through EDSB, D2L, depending on the grade of the student. So the students at home would be accessing what we would say asynchronously while they're home. We have other scenarios where a teacher gets sent home because they were connected to a cohort, but the class wasn't involved. So the kids are all at school. In that scenario, we would send an occasional teacher in so that there's live in-person instruction. One of the interesting pieces or challenging pieces becomes, potentially in a grade 7 to 12 scenario where a cohort of 20 goes home, 10 of them are permitted to return. And then you now have 10 of the kids in person and the teacher back. So now the teacher is teaching in person and then would post asynchronously, again, through EDSB elementary or D2L secondary. So those dynamics change. There's incredible and really impressive work that goes on with Superintendent Allender and principals as they work through this. And then you can imagine the implications on human resources as teachers are being told this often late at night and are then in the process of having to get assistance and occasional teachers. But those are the dynamics that are at play. At its heart, it's dependent upon the directions of the health unit in terms of who's at school and who's at home.
Thank you very much for that.
Thank you so much for clarifying. I think there are clearly a variety of different situations, and as you pointed out, they're all unique, and it really sounds like everybody's doing their best in each different situation. So I thank you very, very much for everybody's ongoing efforts in this area, and including principals as well. I'm hearing too that principals in many cases are making the calls themselves, and again, thank you to teachers as well for being so flexible. Thank you.
Superintendent Hillman.
And just for further clarification, those types of scenarios for families, what could a COVID outlook or what could that look like for my child? That has been added to the outbreak plan. So again, there's some caveats that we can't predict it, and it might not look like this, but that information, those kind of sample scenarios, are now posted and available for families.
Thank you for that. As we kind of adjust as we move forward with vaccinations and those sorts of things, we all need to adjust. As a parent who's had 2 of those phone calls home from a school principal to me, I can say with some certainty and know that it applies across the board, that the comfort sort of lies in that conversation with a trusted person at my local school. And so I'm very appreciative. I have been very appreciative on the receiving end of those very nerve-wracking phone calls, that it's very clearly communicated with empathy and with as much information as possible. And I'm sure that that's happening across the system as well. So thank you to all of us doing that work. Trustee Halberstadt, and then I have Trustee Olmsted.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, my question is of Superintendent Mills. I was getting calls late last week, just before the federal election, from people calling me who were told by Brian Massey's office that they should contact me with regard to their kids not being able to get into the virtual learning stream because they didn't meet the deadline, I guess, to register. And they said they didn't know about it, whether it was a language issue or a phobia issue or a technical issue, but they didn't realize that they had to sign up at a certain, I don't know, what was the date? August something?
Sure. Through you,
8th?
Madam Chair. August 6th was the date for the
6th,
opt-out
yeah.
form. What we did is we had quite a robust media campaign, social media. We had media releases that took place. We did phone calls to the home, so there were 3 calls that went to the home. There were emails that went to the home during that time, so it was a big blast during that time because we knew it was summer to ensure that families were aware of the opt-out form. The information that was shared with families is that everyone would be enrolled in in-person learning. We were one of the few boards in the province that waited that long to give our families the longest amount of time to make that decision, and to be honest, our school staff, the least amount of time to be ready in time. So we counted back the days right to the day to say if we put the opt-out form deadline at this date, then we can start preparing our schools and make sure that they're open and safe for the first day of school. So we did that. We have been telling families that there isn't another opportunity at this time, but that another opportunity would happen at the end of the term. We do work with families on an individual basis when there's extenuating circumstances. So some of the things that you mentioned, like language barriers, if there were language barriers, sometimes there were tech issues where a couple of students in the family were enrolled into virtual school and one was not. So we clearly knew there were some mistakes that happened there. So we've been working through those extenuating circumstances or some medical concerns with our families at this time.
It's a supplementary. I've heard the date September 27th is some kind of a window to get into virtual, or is that false information?
That's a bit of false information. That is our normal reorganization day, and that's our regular ups and downs that happen in the school. This year is a little bit different. We've had to do 2 staffings in the elementary panel. We have to do that's what I'm doing right now over the next 4 days, did yesterday and for the next 2 days. We're doing a brick and mortar reorganization as if everyone is back in their schools. We have to do that for collective agreement purposes. And then the next 2 days, tomorrow and Thursday, we're doing a virtual staffing, which moves students from brick and mortar to the virtual staffing. But that's our normal reorganization process with a little twist with the virtual school this year.
Okay, just quickly, Madam Chair, what happens if the parent says, no, I'm not sending my kid back in there, I'm keeping him or her at home, or the group of us at home, and they don't show up for class, in school class, and they're not doing virtual either. Is that a truancy? Is that what was seen as, or how do we deal with that?
Well, we've been encouraging our families to reach out to the school principal, to go visit the schools, to see the safety measures that are being put in place. We do want our kids back in school as much as possible. We know families are hesitant to do that at this time. If there is no correspondence with the school, so if families aren't reaching out to the school and they're not aware of the reasons why, regular social work attendance counselor calls would be made after the 15th day. But right now, we're really encouraging our families to reach out to schools and talk with the schools. Homeschool has been an option for some of our families, but we are really hoping that they choose to come in person.
Thank you very much for that. Trustee Olmsted.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. Although we're only a few weeks into classes, I've recently had some emails or telephone calls from parents of our grade 12 virtual students and some emails actually from the grade 12 students themselves. I'm not sure if they're just planning ahead or it's because of the upcoming September 25th University Info Day that was just advertised and sent out by guidance counselors. But they're wondering about the students who are in the virtual school and who are going to be graduating this June. Will they be eligible for the scholarships within their home schools because they are shared students? Or does the virtual school have scholarships for those students that they would apply for? Many are concerned because some have been out of their schools since the middle of grade 10 if they did do virtual last year, so that puts them at a disadvantage in terms of scholarships with the students who are in person, and they are concerned. A lot have financial difficulties, and they want their students to be, or their children to be eligible for scholarships. So we're looking for some clarification as to whether they would contact their home schools about that, or whether there are scholarships set up through the virtual school.
Superintendent Canty?
Yes, thank you, through you, Madam Chair. There are no scholarships through the virtual school. The guidance counselors through the home schools are all still in contact and connected with the students in the virtual school. So any scholarships that are available to students at brick and mortar are available to students at the virtual school.
Supplemental, Trustee Olmsted?
No, so just to clarify, because I said that I would ask, so the guidance counselors will be sending the information for the available scholarships to every virtual grade 12 student so that they know exactly what they're eligible to apply for?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, absolutely, that will be happening. And again, please let them know to feel free to contact their school and speak to their guidance counselors at their home schools.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Trustee Chin. I'm sorry, we only are allowed one question for trustee question period, so you can submit your question by email to the appropriate administrator if that's possible. Thank you. So going through the agenda to notices of motion. Any notices of motion for tonight from trustees? Trustee Halberstadt.
Chair Burgess.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I would move that our board strongly urge the health unit, Windsor Essex Health Unit, to restore extracurricular and sporting events at the beginning of October, which was their deadline, and that would include football. And if I could, if the trustees are okay with it, I could ask for a waiver of the rules so that this motion could get through before the start of October. So that's my motion. And I would ask for the rules to be set aside.
So I know what's happening. Is this a notice of motion, or are you asking for the rules to be set aside to that's two different things?
Well, the ideal would be the rules to be set aside. If we don't do that, then it would be a notice of motion that they would get in October the 5th or whatever it is, 2 weeks.
So is there a motion on the floor to set aside the rules
Right.
to allow? So do we have a seconder for that?
So is the trustee asking for consent this evening, or is he asking for us to suspend our rules?
He's asking for us to suspend our rules.
Points of information for clarification, if I could, Madam Chair Burgess.
Very quickly, Trustee Burgess.
Can you give us the rules? Do we need 2/3? Does it need to be unanimous? What does it need to do to put something on the agenda without notice?
So we've been down this road before, but it needs a motion and a seconder. It cannot be debated. It needs 2/3 to pass, I believe. Am I right? Nice. Right now we do not have a seconder. You're going to second that? Okay, so it cannot be, is it debatable? It's not debatable to set the rules aside. It's not debatable. So we're just calling a motion to set aside the rules to allow for a motion to hit the floor this evening. It has been moved and seconded. All in support.
A recorded vote, please.
A recorded vote has been requested, and so I will go through the roll and get all of our recorded votes. So Trustee Cook.
Oppose.
Trustee Halberstadt. Can you guys use your mics, please? We have people on the phone.
Approved.
Trustee Sipkar.
Oppose.
Trustee Leclerc.
Support.
Trustee Hatfield.
Opposed.
Trustee Cheen.
Support.
Trustee Olmsted.
Opposed.
Trustee Burgess.
Opposed.
Trustee Sartori.
Opposed.
Student Trustee McCowie.
Opposed.
Student Trustee Hawkins.
Opposed.
And I oppose the motion as well. That fails. Would you like to submit your notice of motion to Trustee or to Madame Leboeuf for consideration on our next committee or our next board? Thank you. Any other trustees have a notice of motion for this evening?
Burgess?
Oh, Trustee Burgess, and then I see Trustee Cheen. So Trustee Burgess, go ahead.
Notice of motion this evening for the next board meeting, a recommendation that the GEC-DSB present a plan as soon as possible that is compliant with the Windsor-Essex County Health Unit Public Health Guidelines and allows for all students to have 20 interrupted minutes allotted for eating during student nutrition breaks in all our elementary schools in our district.
And you'll submit that to
And I'll
Madame
submit
Leboeuf?
that to Madame Leboeuf. Yes.
And Trustee Cheen.
Okay. To follow the policies of GECDSB, and all the students have to have masks mandatory on campus, and the student exempted from the wearing a mask has to have a face shield, has to wear a face shield, and to protect all the students at school. That's it. Yeah.
Can you submit that to Madame Leboeuf, please?
Okay, thank you.
Did I turn it back off? I did. So we are now at announcements. Do we have any announcements from trustees? I have two from super. I almost gave somebody else an upgrade today. Trustee Olmsted.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to remind everyone that tomorrow is indeed McHappy Day. Please support your Ronald McDonald houses across Canada with the purchase of any item on the menu all day long. Ronald McDonald House of Canada are a home away from home for sick kids and their families while they're in the hospital, including many, many sick kids that I work with. And as well, it's my annual announcement that September is Childhood Cancer Awareness Month. Throughout the world, the sad statistic is that a child is diagnosed with pediatric cancers every 2 minutes. And a diagnosis of childhood cancer is life-altering for both the child and the families. And those children who are fighting are true warriors. So we ask that you wear gold throughout this month to acknowledge the warriors fighting and the families who are supporting them, as many of those local children are students within our board. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Trustee Olmsted. Any other announcements from trustees tonight? I'm looking for, I get to just adjourn us. We're adjourned. Thanks everybody for your time. I appreciate it.